On a humid Manila night in 2023, a 23-year-old Filipino janitor named Rico Paz stood alone on a rooftop of a crumbling startup hub, holding a scratch laptop that contained a secret algorithm worth $87 billion. And the only man who believed in him had just jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge. The story begins 2 years earlier in a glass tower in Palo Alto, where the air smelled like expensive coffee and broken dreams. Rico Paz was not supposed to be there. He had flown 30 hours from Quezon City, scraping together every peso from 3 part-time jobs and a small loan from his older brother, Marco, who drove a jeepney 12 hours a day. Rico's palms were sweaty as he stepped into the elevator, clutching a USB drive that held his life's work, a machine learning model that could predict supply chain disruptions in real time using only public data from social media and traffic cameras. He had no degree from Stanford, no venture capital connections, no polished pitch deck. What he had was a sister dying of leukemia and a desperate belief that this algorithm could save her. The elevator doors opened to a reception area where a blonde woman with a headset asked for his name. "Rico Paz," he whispered. She looked at her tablet, frowned, and said, "Mr. Chin will see you now. You have 7 minutes." Marcus Chin was 34, the CEO of a logistics AI firm called Nexus Dynamics, and he had the cold efficiency of a man who had fired 300 people before breakfast. His office overlooked the entire Bay Area, and he did not stand up when Rico entered. He gestured to a chair that was deliberately too low, making Rico look up at him like a child. "You're the janitor from the Philippines who emailed me 17 times. Marcus said, not as a question but as an accusation. Rico nodded, his throat dry. He began to explain his algorithm, speaking in rushed, broken English about how he had trained it on jeepney routes and Manila traffic jams, how it had predicted the collapse of a major rice supply chain 3 weeks before any government agency. Marcus listened for 90 seconds, then held up his hand. "Let me stop you there," he said. He leaned forward, and his voice was not cruel, but worse, it was bored. "Do you know how many janitors email me every week with world-changing ideas? 40. Minimum. You people watch too many movies." Rico tried to explain again, pulling up his laptop to show the data, but Marcus stood up and walked to a window. "You have no track record, no team, no funding, and no business being in this building," Marcus said. "Your algorithm might be cute for Manila's jeepneys, but global logistics runs on SAP, Oracle, and 1,000 other systems you've never touched. Go home, get a degree, then maybe come back in 10 years. Rico felt something break inside him, but he did not cry. He had learned long ago that crying was a luxury for people who could afford to be seen. He closed his laptop slowly, stood up, and said, "Thank you for your time, sir." Marcus did not turn around. On the elevator ride down, Rico passed a framed photo of Marcus shaking hands with the Philippine president, a photo from a trade mission where Marcus had promised to bring tech jobs to Manila. The irony was so sharp it cut. Outside, the California sun was blinding, and Rico sat on a bench near a food truck, staring at his phone. His brother Marco had sent a message. "How did it go?" Did he see it? Rico typed back. He saw it. He said no. Then he added, "But I'll try again." Marco's reply came immediately. "You always say that. This is getting worse. The hospital wants payment by Friday." Rico put his phone away and looked up at the tower, where Marcus Chun stood somewhere above him, probably already forgetting he existed. That was the moment Rico made a decision that would change everything. Not out of anger, but out of quiet, desperate love for his sister and a stubborn belief that a janitor from Quezon City had just as much right to change the world as any CEO. 2 weeks later, Rico was back in Manila, mopping floors at the same startup hub where he had once dreamed of pitching. The hub was called The Forge, a converted warehouse in Makati where young Filipino coders worked on beanbags and drank instant coffee. Rico cleaned their bathrooms and emptied their trash, and late at night, when everyone else went home, he sat in a corner and worked on his algorithm. His sister, Luna, was 17, with a laugh that filled her small concrete apartment and hair that was falling out from chemotherapy. She did not know how sick she really was because Rico and Marco had decided to hide the worst of it. Every night, Rico would visit her at the public hospital, bring her ice cream from a street vendor, and tell her stories about Silicon Valley, about the glass towers, the smart people, the day he almost convinced the CEO to invest. Luna would smile, her thin fingers wrapped around his, and say, "You'll do it next time, Kuya." "I know you will." Marco would arrive later, exhausted from driving his jeepney through Manila's endless traffic, and the three of them would sit together in a hospital room, the only light coming from a flickering fluorescent bulb and the glow of Rico's laptop. The algorithm that Marcus Chun had dismissed was not cute. It was terrifyingly precise. Rico had built it by scraping years of public data from Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, combined with traffic camera feeds from the MMDA and weather reports from Pagasa. The model learned to see patterns that humans could not. A sudden spike in flood-related posts in a certain province, a drop in jeepney GPS signals on a specific route, a cluster of complaints about rice prices in a market. 3 weeks after his rejection from Nexus Dynamics, Rico ran a simulation that predicted a major banana supply disruption from Davao to Japan, triggered by a combination of a coming typhoon and a labor strike that had not even been announced yet. He sent the prediction to a small Japanese trading firm he had found on LinkedIn. They ignored him. The typhoon hit. The strike happened. The supply chain broke. The trading firm lost $4 million. 2 weeks after that, the same firm's supply chain director emailed Rico with a single word: "How?" Rico did not answer the email immediately. He was at the hospital, watching Luna sleep. Her breathing was shallow, and the doctors had started talking about bone marrow transplants that cost 2 million pesos, about $40,000. Marco sat in the corner, counting crumpled bills from his daily earnings. "We have 12,000 pesos, Marco said quietly. "That's not even enough for 1 more week of chemo." Rico looked at his laptop, then at his brother, then at his sister. "I know how to get the money," he said, "but it's going to be dangerous." Marco's eyes narrowed. Marco was the older brother, 31, with thick arms from lifting cargo and a face that had seen too many hard years. He had dropped out of school at 14 to support their family after their father died in a construction accident. "What kind of dangerous?" Marco asked. Rico explained his plan. He would not sell the algorithm to big companies like Nexus Dynamics. Instead, he would use it to predict supply chain failures and then trade on that information himself, buying futures contracts on commodities that were about to spike in price, selling short on companies that were about to lose shipments. It was not illegal exactly, but it was the kind of gray area that made people nervous. Marco listened, then nodded slowly. "I don't understand half of what you just said," Marco admitted. "But if it saves Luna, I'll drive you anywhere you need to go." That night, Rico made his first trade. He used every peso he had, 30,000 pesos saved from months of cleaning floors, to buy futures on coconut oil from a region where his algorithm predicted a coming pest infestation. Marco thought he was insane. The jeepney drivers at Marco's terminal thought he was scamming his brother. But 10 days later, the pest infestation hit. Coconut oil prices jumped 40%, and Rico's 30,000 pesos became 200,000 pesos. It was not $40,000, but it was a start. Luna's next chemo treatment was paid for. Marco looked at the bank statement on Rico's phone and wept. He had never seen that many zeros in his life. "We can do this," Rico said, but his voice was shaking, because his algorithm had also shown him something else, something he had not told Marco. The model had flagged a massive, complex pattern involving semiconductor shipments from Taiwan to the United States, a pattern that suggested a hidden vulnerability in the global chip supply chain. If Rico was right, a single event in the South China Sea could trigger a chain reaction that would cost the tech industry billions. And Marcus Chen's company, Nexus Dynamics, was the most exposed of all. Rico did not want revenge. That was what he told himself, anyway. He wanted money for Luna's transplant. But the more he stared at the semiconductor data, the more he realized that his algorithm had found something that no one else in the world could see. Not Marcus Chun, not the analyst at Goldman Sachs, not the PhDs at MIT. The global supply chain for advanced chips was balanced on a knife's edge, dependent on a single shipping lane to the Luzon Strait, a lane that was monitored by aging satellites and understaffed coast guards. A typhoon, a military exercise, even a large cargo ship breaking down in the wrong place. Any of these could create a bottleneck that would ripple through every tech company on Earth. Rico calculated the probability. 78% chance of a major disruption within 6 months. He calculated the potential profit. If he positioned himself correctly, he could turn 200,000 pesos into 10 million pesos. Enough for Luna's transplant, and enough to never clean another floor again. But to do that, he would need to move fast. And he would need help from someone who understood the global trading system better than he did. That someone was a woman named Amira Santos, a 30-year-old Filipino-Chinese trader who had been blacklisted from every major bank in Manila for blowing the whistle on a money laundering scheme. She worked now from a tiny apartment in Binondo, trading her own small account and teaching coding to street children in her free time. Rico found her through a forum for Filipino data scientists, and when he sent her his algorithm predictions, she replied within an hour, "Come to Binondo tomorrow. Come alone." He went, "Of course." Amira was not what he expected. She had short gray-streaked hair despite her age, wore thick glasses that made her eyes look enormous, and chain-smoked cheap menthol cigarettes while she studied his code. For 3 hours, she said nothing. She scrolled through thousands of lines, read her own tests, cross-referenced his data sources. Finally, she put out her cigarette and said, "You've built a crystal ball. Do you understand that? This isn't just supply chain prediction. This is precognition." Rico shook his head. "It's just math. Lots of math." Amira laughed, a harsh sound that turned into a cough. "Math that will get us both killed if we're not careful. The people who control global logistics don't like surprises. They especially don't like surprises from a janitor and a whistleblower." But Amira agreed to help, not for the money. She had turned down bigger fortunes before. She agreed because she looked at Rico's face, at the desperation behind his eyes, and saw her younger brother who had died of dengue, because no hospital would treat him without a deposit. "I'll teach you to trade," she said, "but you have to promise me something. When this is over, you don't disappear. You use this algorithm to help people. Real people, not just your sister." Rico promised, and he meant it. Over the next 3 months, he and Amira worked together every night, building a trading system around his predictions. Marco drove them to meet with small-time commodity brokers, farmers' cooperatives, and even a contact in the Coast Guard who provided unofficial shipping data. The algorithm grew more accurate with each new data source. Rico's trades grew larger. By the end of the 3rd month, he had turned 200,000 pesos into 4 million pesos. Luna's transplant was scheduled. For the first time in years, the Paz family had hope, but hope is a dangerous thing, because the algorithm's prediction about the semiconductor supply chain had only grown stronger, and Rico had made a decision that Amira did not know about. He had shorted Nexus Dynamics stock. Not a lot, just a small position, using a shell company that Amira had helped him set up for other trades. He told himself it was just a hedge, just a way to protect his growing capital. But late at night, when he could not sleep, he imagined Marcus Chen's face when the stock crashed. He imagined walking into that glass office again, not as a janitor begging for 7 minutes, but as a man who had seen what the great CEO could not. The fantasy was sweet and poisonous. Marco noticed a change in his younger brother. Rico had always been quiet, but now there was something harder in his eyes, something that reminded Marco of the lone sharks who used to circle their neighborhood. "You're not just doing this for Luna anymore," Marco said one night as they sat outside the hospital. Rico did not answer. "Kuya, I'm your brother. I know you. Tell me what you're planning." Rico looked at his hands. They were clean now, no more mopping floors, but they felt dirtier than ever. "I'm planning to make sure no one ever dismisses us again," he said finally. Marco was silent for a long time. Then he said, "Luna doesn't need you to be angry. She needs you to be alive." The event that Rico's algorithm had predicted came on a Tuesday. A Chinese Coast Guard vessel and a Philippine supply ship collided in the Luzon Strait, neither side claiming fault, but both refusing to back down. Within hours, the strait was effectively closed to commercial shipping. Within days, semiconductor shipments from Taiwan to the United States were backed up by 2 weeks. Within a week, Nexus Dynamics announced that their chip inventory was critically low. The stock began to fall. Rico's short position made him 5 million pesos in 3 days. Amira called him furious. "You shorted them? Without telling me?" Do you understand how dangerous this is? If anyone traces the trades back to us, no one will trace them, Rico said. You taught me well. But he was wrong. Someone did trace them. Not a regulator. Not a bank. A cybersecurity analyst at Nexus Dynamics named David Kim, who had been tasked with investigating unusual trading patterns around the company's stock. David was a forensic accountant with the patience of a hunter and the memory of an elephant. He followed the shell company's trail through 3 countries for banks and a maze of cryptocurrency transactions. At the end of that trail, he found a name, Rico Paz, the same Rico Paz who had emailed Marcus Chin 17 times. The same Rico Paz who had been rejected from this very office. Marcus Chin did not believe at first. A janitor? Shorting his stock based on a supply chain prediction? It sounded like a bad movie. But David Kim showed him the evidence. The timing of the trades, the accuracy of predictions, the impossible precision of the algorithm. This kid sees things our entire analytics team missed, David said. He's not lucky. He's just that good. Marcus stared at the screen, at the face of the young man he had dismissed 2 years ago. He remembered the cheap blazer, the nervous hands, the way Rico had said, "Thank you for your time," without a trace of anger. Marcus had been so sure of himself, so certain that a janitor from the Philippines could not possibly have anything valuable to offer. Now that same janitor was profiting from his company's pain. The irony was not lost on him. But Marcus Chun did not become a CEO by apologizing. He became a CEO by winning. He picked up his phone and made 2 calls, one to his lawyers and one to a private investigator in Manila. Back in Manila, Rico had no idea that anyone was looking for him. He was at the hospital with Luna, who had just received her bone marrow transplant. The surgery had gone well, and the doctors were cautiously optimistic. Marco was there too, holding Luna's hand while she slept. For one perfect moment, the 3 of them were together, and the future felt possible. Then Rico's phone buzzed. A message from Amira. They know. Get out. Now. Rico's blood turned to ice. He looked at Marco, at Luna, at the peaceful beep of the heart monitor. I have to go, he whispered. Marco grabbed his arm. Go where? What's happening? I'll explain later. Just stay with Luna. Don't tell anyone where I am. He kissed his sister's forehead, squeezed his brother's shoulder, and walked out of the hospital room. He did not run. Running would attract attention. He walked calmly down the hallway, down the stairs, out the back entrance into the Manila heat. The streets were crowded, as always. Jeeps, tricycles, vendors selling mangoes and cigarettes. Rico disappeared into the crowd, his heart pounding, his mind racing. He had 5 million pesos in an offshore account. He had a laptop with an algorithm worth billions, and he had no idea who was coming for him. The private investigator Marcus Chin hired was a former Philippine military intelligence officer named Gregorio Greg Alcantara, a man with a shaved head, a gold tooth, and the unsettling habit of smiling while he described violence. Greg found Rico within 48 hours, not through high-tech surveillance, but through the oldest method in the book. He followed Marco's jeepney. Every night after visiting Luna at the hospital, Marco would drive to a rundown boarding house in Santa Mesa, bring a bag of food, and stay for exactly 1 hour. Greg watched from a tricycle across the street, noting the window where a faint blue glow from a laptop appeared every night at the same time. On the 3rd night, he knocked on the door of room 14. Rico opened it, still wearing his hospital visit clothes, and found himself staring at a gold tooth and a business card that said Security Consulting. Mr. Paz, Greg said, still smiling. Mr. Chin sends his regards. He'd like to talk. No police, no lawyers, just a conversation. I strongly recommend you say yes. Rico's first instinct was to run. His second instinct was to fight. But he looked at Greg's arms, at the way the man stood with his weight balanced like a boxer, and he knew neither option would work. So he nodded, stepped aside, and let Greg into his room. The room was small, a single bed, a plastic table, a bathroom with a leaky faucet. On the table sat the laptop, open to the algorithm's dashboard. Greg looked at the screen without understanding any of it, then looked back at Rico. You're a smart kid, smart enough to know when you stepped on the wrong toes. Mr. Chin lost $11 million because of your trades. $11 million. That's not a slap on the wrist. That's a problem. Rico kept his voice steady. I didn't cause a collision in the strait. I just predicted it. Greg laughed, a low rumble that turned into a cough. Predicted cause doesn't matter. You profited from his loss. In his world. That's the same as stealing. But here's the thing. He doesn't want to destroy you. He wants to buy you. Rico blinked. Buy me? Greg nodded. He wants the algorithm. He wants you to come work for Nexus Dynamics, head of predictive analytics. A real salary, a real title, a real office in Palo Alto. He'll even pay for Luna's remaining medical bills and give Marco a job as a fleet manager for the company's Manila office. All he asks is that you drop the short position, sign a non-compete, and never talk about this again. The offer was so generous, so perfectly tailored to Rico's deepest desires, that it felt like a trap, and yet a real office, real money, Luna safe, Marco employed. No more mopping floors, no more hiding in boarding houses, no more looking over his shoulder. Rico closed his eyes and saw his sister's face, her thin fingers wrapped around his, her whisper. You'll do it next time, Kuya. He opened his eyes and looked at Greg. What's the catch? Greg's gold tooth gleamed. The catch is that you'll be working for the man who threw you out of his office. The catch is that he'll own you. Every idea you have, every line of code you write, every prediction your algorithm makes, it'll all belong to him. That's the deal. Take it or leave it. Rico asked for 24 hours to decide. Greg agreed, but his smile said that running would not change the outcome. After Greg left, Rico called Amira. She arrived within the hour, smelling of menthol cigarettes and carrying a paper bag full of street food. They sat on the edge of Rico's bed, eating lumpia and talking in low voices. You can't trust him, Amira said. Marcus Chun didn't become a billionaire by being generous. He's offering you a cage because he's afraid of what you'll do outside of it. Rico wiped his hands on his shorts. I know, but Luna needs stability. Marco needs a real job. I can't keep living like this. Hiding, trading, waiting for someone to knock on my door. Amira grabbed his wrist, her fingers surprisingly strong. Listen to me. Your algorithm is not a toy. It's not a tool for making rich people richer. It could save lives, predicting famine, preventing supply chain collapses that lead to starvation, helping small farmers get fair prices. If you give it to Marcus Chun, he'll use it to crush competitors and maximize profits. That's all he knows how to do. Rico knew she was right. He had known it from the moment Greg made the offer. But knowing and doing were different things. He thought about the past 2 years. The rejection in Palo Alto, the night spent cleaning bathrooms while other people built companies, the hospital bills that piled up like graves, the look on Marco's face when he counted those crumpled bills. He thought about how it felt to be dismissed, to be invisible, to be told that his ideas were cute but useless. And he thought about how it felt to be right, to prove, with every accurate prediction, that he was not invisible, that he mattered. What if I don't give it to him? Rico said quietly, what if I use it to build something of my own? Amira released his wrist and sat back. That's what I've been waiting to hear. But building something of your own means you need allies. Real allies. Not just a whistleblower and a jeepney driver. You need lawyers, investors, people who can protect you from Marcus Chun and everyone like him. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts. There's someone I want you to meet. A woman named Lord Villanueva. She's a human rights lawyer who specializes in tech cases. She's also my ex-wife. Rico did not sleep that night. He sat by the window, watching the jeepneys and tricycles crawl through Santa Mesa, and he thought about the weight of choices. At dawn, he called Marco and asked him to come to the boarding house. Marco arrived within an hour, his uniform still damp from the morning rain, his eyes red from lack of sleep. Rico told him everything. The short position, the private investigator, Marcus Chen's offer, and Amira's warning. Marco listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. When Rico finished, Marco was silent for a long time. Then he stood up, walked to a window, and looked out at the street where his jeepney was parked. When we were kids, Marco said slowly, you used to fix things, not just computers, everything. The broken fan, the leaky faucet, the old radio. You'd sit there for hours, taking things apart, figuring out how they worked. I used to think you were wasting your time, but you weren't. You were learning how to see what other people couldn't see. He turned to face his brother. Marcus Chin sees you as a broken thing he can fix and own. But you're not broken. You're the one who sees. Don't let him take that from you. Rico called Greg Alcantara at 8 in the morning. Tell Mr. Chin thank you for the offer, he said. But I'm going to build my own company instead. There was a pause on the line. Then Greg laughed, the same low rumble as before, but this time there was something sharp underneath it. Kid, you have no idea what you just started. The line went dead. For 3 days, nothing happened. Rico continued visiting Luna at the hospital, continued working on his algorithm, continued meeting with Amira to plan their next steps. Lourdes Villanueva, Amira's ex-wife, agreed to represent them pro bono. She was a tall woman with a severe haircut and a voice that could cut glass. Marcus Chun has a reputation for crushing people who say no to him. Lourdes said during their first meeting at a coffee shop in Quezon City, he won't come after you directly. He'll use proxies. He'll spread rumors that your algorithm is stolen. He'll file nuisance lawsuits to drain your resources. He'll try to turn your own family against you. Are you prepared for that? Rico looked at Amira, then at Lourdes, then at his phone where a photo of Luna smiled back at him. I'm prepared. But preparation and reality are different things. On the 4th day, Marco's jeepney was impounded by the city government for allegedly operating without a proper license. The license was valid. The impounding was illegal. But Marco did not have the money to fight it, and the impound lot charged a daily storage fee that would eat through his savings in a week. On the 5th day, the hospital called Rico to say that Luna's insurance had been temporarily suspended due to a paperwork error. The error was that someone had submitted a fraudulent change of address form, and now the insurance company needed 30 days to investigate. On the 6th day, a blog post appeared online accusing Rico of stealing his algorithm from an open-source project. The accusation was false, but it was written well, seeded with just enough technical details to sound credible. Within hours, the post had been shared by several prominent tech influencers. None of them had bothered to fact-check it. On the 7th day, someone broke into Amira's apartment. Nothing was stolen, but her laptop was wiped clean. Her backup drives were smashed, and on her bed, someone had placed a single white orchid, the same flower that Marcus Chen's company used as its logo. Rico wanted to call Marcus Chen directly. He wanted to scream, to threaten, to beg. But Amira stopped him. That's what he wants, she said. They were sitting in Lourdes' office, the three of them surrounded by law books and the smell of old paper. He wants you to react emotionally. He wants you to make a mistake. Lourdes nodded, typing furiously on her laptop. I've filed injunctions against the impounding and the insurance suspension. They'll take a few days to process. In the meantime, we need to go on the offensive. We need to tell your story, publicly, before Marcus Chen's version of it becomes the only version people believe. Rico shook his head. No one will care about a janitor from Quezon City. You're wrong, Amira said. People will care because you're not just a janitor. You're every person who's ever been told they're not good enough. You're every worker who's been dismissed by a boss who didn't bother to listen. You're every Filipino who's been told that our country only produces maids and drivers, not inventors and visionaries. She leaned forward, her thick glasses making her eyes look enormous. Marcus Chun didn't reject you because your algorithm was bad. He rejected you because he couldn't see past your uniform. That's not your failure. That's his blindness. Lourdes arranged for Rico to give an interview to a freelance journalist named Isabel Reyes, who wrote for an international tech publication called The Circuit. Isabel was a small woman with a perpetual frown and a reputation for asking questions that made powerful people uncomfortable. She met Rico at a carinderia in Santa Mesa, the same neighborhood where he had hidden from Greg Alcantara. They sat on plastic stools, ate pork sisig, and talked for 3 hours. Rico told her everything. The rejection in Palo Alto, his brother's sacrifices, his sister's illness, the algorithm, the trades, the threats. Isabel listened without taking notes, her eyes never leaving his face. When he finished, She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You know they're going to try to destroy you after this publishes, right?" Rico looked at his hands. They were clean now, but he could still feel the ghost of a mop handle between his fingers. "They've already tried," he said. "I'm still here." Isabel's frown softened just slightly. "I'll have the story ready in 3 days. Make sure you have a lawyer on speed dial." The story published on a Thursday. It was titled "The Janitor Who Saw the Future," and it began with the image of a young man in a faded gray uniform, standing in a glass tower, being told to go home. Within 24 hours, the story had been read by 2 million people. Within 48 hours, it had been translated into 12 languages. Within 72 hours, Marcus Chen's public relations team had issued 3 different statements, each one more defensive than the last. The first statement said that Nexus Dynamics had no record of Rico's pitch. The second said that the company welcomed innovation from all sources. The third said that Mr. Chen was proud to have inspired Rico's journey, which was so blatantly false that even Nexus Dynamics' own employees laughed at it. But the real turning point came when a former Nexus Dynamics data scientist named Priya Sharma came forward with a confession. Priya had been in the room during Rico's pitch. She had seen Marcus Chen dismiss him after 90 seconds. And she had later, on Marcus's orders, built a team to reverse engineer the few details she remembered from Rico's presentation. For 2 years, Nexus Dynamics had been quietly trying to replicate Rico's algorithm. They had failed. Every attempt had produced garbage, because the thing that made Rico's algorithm work was not just the math. It was the data, the jeepney routes, the traffic cameras, the social media posts from Filipino farmers. Marcus Chen had dismissed those sources as cute, but they were the secret, and without them, the algorithm was just another pretty equation. Rico watched Priya's interview from Luna's hospital room. Luna was awake now, her color slowly returning after the transplant. She sat up in bed, holding a cup of ice chips, and watched her brother's face as the news played on a small TV mounted to the wall. "You did it, Kuya," she whispered. "They finally see you." Rico shook his head. "They don't see me. They see a story. A good story. But stories fade." He looked at his laptop, where his algorithm continued to run, processing millions of data points every second. What matters is what comes next. What came next was a flood of offers. Venture capitalists from Singapore, angel investors from Tokyo, even a representative from a European sovereign wealth fund. They all wanted the same thing, to own Rico's algorithm. They offered him money, fame, security. They offered to make him rich beyond his dreams. And every time, Rico said no, not because he was proud, but because Amira had made him promise. "You build something of your own," she had said, "not something they own, something that belongs to you and the people you love." So Rico said no to the venture capitalists. He said no to the angel investors. And then he called his brother Marco and said, "How would you like to be my chief operations officer?" Marco thought he was joking. When he realized Rico was serious, he started to cry. "I didn't even finish high school," Marco said, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "I drive a jeepney. I don't know anything about operations." Rico put his hand on his brother's shoulder. "You know how to get things done. You know how to take care of people. You know how to keep going when everything falls apart. That's what operations means." They incorporated a company called Suliap, a Tagalog word meaning a glimpse or a vision. The company had 3 employees: Rico as Chief Technology Officer, Marco as Chief Operations Officer, and Amira as Chief Strategy Officer. Lourdes served as outside counsel, and Isabel Reyes became their unofficial media advisor. They had no office, no funding, and no revenue. What they had was an algorithm that could predict the future, and a story that had captured the world's imagination. It was not enough, but it was a start. 6 months after the story broke, Suliap had grown to 40 employees, most of them Filipino, most of them self-taught, and all of them working from a repurposed warehouse in Mandaluyong that still smelled faintly of fish sauce from its previous life as a dried fish distribution center. Rico's algorithm had predicted 3 major supply chain disruptions: a coffee blight in Brazil, a shipping container shortage in Rotterdam, and a lithium mine collapse in Australia. And Suliap had turned those predictions into a consulting business that earned $8 million in its first quarter. Luna was in remission, living in a small apartment near the warehouse, learning to code from Amira and regrow her hair in soft black curls. Marco had traded his jeepney for a company car, but he still woke up at 4 in the morning out of habit and still counted every peso like it might disappear. For the first time in their lives, the Paz family had more than enough. But Rico could not shake the feeling that Marcus Chun had not forgotten them. The lawsuits had stopped after Priya Sharma's interview, but the silence was worse than the noise. It was the silence of a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. The moment came on a Tuesday. Rico was in a meeting with a potential client from Japan when his phone buzzed with a news alert. He glanced at the screen and felt the floor drop out from under him. A class action lawsuit had been filed against Suliap in the United States District Court for the Northern District of California. The plaintiffs were a group of hedge funds that had lost money on the same supply chain disruptions that Suliap had predicted. The lawsuit alleged that Rico had used non-public information to profit from the disruptions. In other words, insider trading. The law firm representing the hedge funds was the same firm that Marcus Chin used for all his legal work. Rico excused himself from the meeting, walked into the warehouse's small kitchen, and vomited into the sink. Amira found him there a few minutes later, his forehead pressed against the cool metal of the refrigerator. "I read the complaint," she said quietly. "It's nonsense. Your algorithm only uses public data. We documented every source. We have audit trails for every trade." Rico turned to face her. "It doesn't matter if it's nonsense. A lawsuit like this will take years to resolve, millions in legal fees. And in the meantime, no one will want to do business with us. Every client will be scared of getting dragged into the discovery process. Every investor will run the other way." Amira knew he was right. She had seen this tactic before, back when she was a trader. Rich people did not need to win lawsuits. They just needed to file them. The cost of defending yourself was often punishment enough. Lord arrived at the warehouse within 2 hours, carrying a stack of legal briefs and a grim expression. "The good news is that the lawsuit has no merit," she said, spreading documents across a folding table. "The bad news is that the judge assigned to the case is a former corporate lawyer who has ruled in favor of hedge funds in 17 out of the last 20 similar cases. The worst news is that Marcus Chun has been opposed as a potential witness. He's going to say that you stole trade secrets from Nexus Dynamics when you pitched to him. We both know that's false. But a jury might believe a billionaire CEO over a former janitor." Marco, who had been standing in the corner listening, spoke up. "Then we need to make sure the jury knows who Marcus Chin really is. We need to show them the man who threw my brother out of his office after 90 seconds. We need to show them the man who sent a private investigator to threaten us. We need to show them the man who had Amira's apartment ransacked." Lourdes shook her head. "Proving that Marcus Chun is a bad person doesn't prove that Rico didn't steal trade secrets. The two things are legally unrelated. What we need is evidence. Documentary evidence that Nexus Dynamics tried to reverse engineer Rico's algorithm. Emails, memos, anything that shows they failed because they didn't have his data sources." Rico looked up. Priya Sharma. She was there. She saw them try to copy my work. Lourdes nodded. "Priya Sharma is our star witness, but she's also terrified. She still works in tech. If she testifies against Marcus Chun, she'll never get another job in Silicon Valley. We need to convince her that the risk is worth it." That night, Rico called Priya Sharma directly. He had kept her number from the brief period after her interview when they had exchanged messages. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice sleepy and cautious. "It's Rico Paz," he said. "I'm sorry to call so late, but I need your help." There was a long silence. Then Priya said, "I know about the lawsuit. I've been expecting your call. I want to help you. But you need to understand what you're asking. Marcus Chun destroyed the career of a senior vice president who disagreed with him in a meeting. I'm just a data scientist. If I testify against him, I'm finished." Rico closed his eyes. He thought about Luna, about Marco, about the fish sauce smell of the warehouse that had become his home. He thought about the janitor's uniform he used to wear, and the way Marcus Chun had looked through him like he was made of glass. "You're not finished," he said quietly. You're the person who told the truth when everyone else stayed silent. That's not finished. That's just starting." Priya was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was different. Harder, more certain. "I'll do it, but I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for every other person who's been told that their ideas don't matter because of who they are or where they came from. I'll testify. Send me the court date." The trial began 4 months later in a federal courthouse in San Francisco. Rico flew to California for the first time since his rejected pitch. But this time he was not alone. Marco came with him, wearing a suit that Lourdes had helped him pick out. Amira stayed in Manila to manage the company, but she sent a good luck charm, a small wooden jeepney that Rico kept in his pocket during every court session. Luna wanted to come, but the doctor said she was still too weak for international travel. She sent a video message instead, her face pale but smiling, her hair now long enough to tuck behind her ears. "Show them, Kuya," she said. "Show them what a janitor from Quezon City can do." Marcus Chin arrived on the second day of the trial, surrounded by a team of lawyers who looked like they had been carved from marble. He wore a charcoal suit that cost more than Rico's entire annual salary from his janitor job. He did not look at Rico. Not once. But Rico felt the weight of his presence like a physical thing, a cold pressure at the back of his neck. The prosecution's case was simple. Rico Paz had access to non-public information about supply chain disruptions because he had stolen trade secrets from Nexus Dynamics during his 7-minute pitch. Their evidence was thin. A single email from Rico to Marcus Chan that mentioned predictive modeling and a sworn statement from a Nexus Dynamics receptionist who claimed she saw Rico acting suspiciously near a server room. The receptionist, it turned out, had been promoted to office manager shortly after giving her statement. Lourdes tore the statement apart in cross-examination. "You don't actually remember seeing Mr. Paz near the server room, do you?" she asked. The receptionist hesitated. "I think I did." "You think? Or you were told to say that by your boss?" The receptionist looked at Marcus Chan, then at the judge, then at her hands. "I was told to remember," she whispered. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The judge banged his gavel for silence. Marcus Chen's lead lawyer objected, but the damage was done. The jury had seen a witness admit that she had been coached. But the real turning point came when Priya Sharma took the stand. She walked to the witness box with her shoulders back and her eyes straight ahead, the same hoodie she had worn in her television interview replaced by a simple black dress. She described the day of Rico's pitch in precise, painful detail. How Marcus Chun had looked at his watch after 90 seconds. How he had called Rico's algorithm cute. How he had ordered Priya's team to reverse engineer the few details they remembered from Rico's presentation. And how, for 2 years, they had failed. "We couldn't make it work," Priya said, her voice steady, "because we didn't have the data." Mr. Paz was using sources that Mr. Chan had dismissed as irrelevant. Traffic cameras, social media posts, weather reports from local governments. We were trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing. Marcus Chen's lawyer rose to cross-examine. "Ms. Sharma, you're fired from Nexus Dynamics, weren't you?" Priya nodded. "I was laid off during a reduction in force." "A reduction in force that happened immediately after you gave that interview about Mr. Paz?" "The timing was suggestive," Priya said carefully. "I'll take that as a yes," the lawyer said. "So you have a grudge against my client. You're here to get revenge." Priya did not flinch. "I'm here to tell the truth." Mr. Chun dismissed Mr. Paz because he couldn't see past his uniform. Then he tried to steal his work. And when that failed, he tried to destroy him. "I'm here because someone has to say what happened." The lawyer pressed harder, but Priya did not break. She had spent 2 years being afraid of Marcus Chun, and she was tired of being afraid. When she stepped down from the witness stand, she walked past Marcus Chen's table and looked him directly in the eye. He looked away first. The jury deliberated for 4 days. Rico spent those days in a small hotel room near the courthouse, pacing the carpet until Marco made him sit down. They watched bad movies on cable television and ordered room service that neither of them could eat. Luna called every night, asking for updates that Rico could not give. Amira sent messages filled with legal analysis that Rico could not process. On the 4th day, the jury sent a note to the judge. They had reached a verdict. The courtroom was packed when the verdict was read. Journalists from around the world filled the gallery. Marcus Chun sat at the defense table, his face a mask of calm control. Rico sat at the plaintiff's table, Marco on one side and Lourdes on the other. His hand was in his pocket, wrapped around a small wooden jeepney that Amira had given him. The jury foreman, a middle-aged woman with gray hair and kind eyes, stood up and unfolded a piece of paper. On the charge of trade secret misappropriation, she read, we the jury find the defendant, Rico Paz, not liable. Rico's breath caught in his throat. On the charge of insider trading, the foreman continued, we the jury find defendant, Rico Paz, not liable. Marco grabbed Rico's arm, his grip almost painful. On the charge of breach of contract, the foreman said, we the jury find defendant Rico Paz not liable. The courtroom erupted. Journalists ran for the doors. Marcus Chen's lawyers huddled together, their faces white. But Marcus Chen himself did not move. He sat perfectly still, staring at Rico with an expression that was not anger or defeat, but something else entirely, something that looked almost like respect. After the verdict, Marcus Chen walked across the courtroom to where Rico stood with Marco and Lourdes. The bailiff tensed, but Marcus held up his hands to show he meant no harm. He stopped a few feet away from Rico and looked at him for a long moment. You won, Marcus said quietly. I underestimated you, not just your algorithm. I thought you were a janitor who got lucky, but you're not lucky. You're the real thing. Rico felt the weight of those words, the same words he had dreamed of hearing for 2 years. But they felt hollow now, empty. I didn't win because I'm the real thing, Rico said. I won because I had people who believed in me. My brother, my sister, my friends. You've never had that, have you? No one who believed in you for who you are, not for what you could do for them. Marcus Chen's face flickered, just for a moment, and Rico saw something he had not expected. Loneliness. Then Marcus turned and walked away, his marble-carved lawyers falling into step behind him. He did not look back. Rico returned to Manila a week later. The warehouse in Mandaluyong still smelled faintly of fish sauce, but now it also smelled like victory. The employees had hung a banner that said, Suliap, the world saw what we saw. Luna was there, her hair now thick enough to braid, her cheeks full of color. She ran to Rico and hugged him so hard he staggered. Marco stood behind her, pretending not to cry. Amira was there too, leaning against a pillar, smoking a menthol cigarette despite the no-smoking signs. She caught Rico's eye and gave him a small nod. That nod said everything. We did it. We survived. We won. But winning, Rico was learning, was not an ending. It was a beginning. The lawsuit had drained their resources, but had also proven their legitimacy. New clients were calling. New investors were offering terms that did not require giving up control. Suliap was no longer a startup that might fail. It was a company that had defeated a billionaire in open court and lived to tell the story. But Rico did not want to spend his life fighting. He wanted to spend his life building. That night, after the celebration ended and the warehouse emptied, he sat alone on the loading dock where he had once called Priya Sharma. The Manila sky stretched above him, polluted but still full of stars if you knew where to look. His phone buzzed with a message from Luna. Thank you for not giving up, Kuya. He smiled and typed back, thank you for not giving up on me. Then he opened his laptop and looked at the algorithm. It was still running, still processing, still seeing patterns that no one else could see. But now it was not just his algorithm. It belonged to Suliap, to Marco, to Amira, to Luna, to every Filipino who had ever been told that they were not good enough. Rico closed his laptop, stood up, and walked back into the warehouse. Tomorrow there would be more work, more predictions, more challenges. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, he was not afraid. The story of Rico Paz and Marcus Chun became a case study in business schools, a parable about pride and humility, about seeing in blindness. But the real story was smaller and larger at the same time. It was a story of a jeepney driver who believed in his little brother. It was a story of a teenage girl who refused to die before she saw her family happy. It was a story of a whistleblower and a lawyer and a journalist who chose truth over comfort. And it was the story of a janitor who did not stop cleaning until he had built something clean enough to last. Rico Paz never became a billionaire. He never moved to Silicon Valley. He stayed in Manila in the fish sauce warehouse, and he built a company that helped farmers get fair prices for their crops, helped small businesses predict disruptions before they happened, and helped the world see that the future did not belong to the people in glass towers. It belonged to the people who were willing to look closely at the things everyone else ignored. The algorithm was never the miracle. The miracle was the man who built it, and the people who loved him enough to help him carry it. 1 year after the trial, Rico received a letter. It was handwritten on heavy cream-colored paper, the kind that cost more than a week's groceries in Santa Mesa. The return address was a post office box in San Francisco. There was no name. Rico opened the letter with shaking hands. Inside, on a single sheet of paper, were 3 sentences. "You were right. I was blind. I'm sorry." There was no signature, but Rico knew who had written it. He read the letter 3 times, then folded it carefully and put it in the drawer where he kept Luna's first hospital bracelet and Marco's old jeepney key. He did not show it to anyone. He did not need to. The apology was not for him. It was for the man who wrote it, a small acknowledgement of a truth too long denied. Some people spend their whole lives learning to see. Others never learn at all. Marcus Chun had taken the first step. Whether he would take the second was up to him. The last time Rico visited the hospital where Luna had almost died, he walked through the cancer ward and saw a young boy sitting alone on a bed, his head bald from chemotherapy, his eyes staring at a cracked tablet. Rico sat down beside him and asked what he was watching. The boy shrugged. "Nothing. There's nothing good." Rico pulled out his laptop and opened the algorithm. He showed the boy how it worked, the traffic cameras, the social media posts, the weather reports. He showed him how data could tell stories, how patterns could save lives, how a janitor from Quezon City had used the same tools to change the world. The boy's eyes widened. "You're that guy," he whispered. "The one from the news?" Rico nodded. "I'm that guy, and you could be that guy too. All you need is something to see and someone who believes you can see it." He left the boy with a cheap notebook and a pen and instructions to write down everything he noticed for 1 week. The traffic, the weather, the way people move through the city. "That's where it starts," Rico said. "Not with a computer, with your eyes." That was the real algorithm, not the code, the seeing, the willingness to look at the things everyone else ignored, the jeepney driver's route, the street vendor's inventory, the farmer's weather report, and recognize that they were not small things. They were the world. Rico Paz spent the rest of his life helping other people see that. He never forgot the man who had dismissed him, because that dismissal was the fire that had forged him. But he also never hated Marcus Chun. Hate, he learned, was just another kind of blindness. And Rico had spent too long learning to see to close his eyes now